Hello everybody, I'm Just from Hambach Forest, where we have been blockading and occupying and tree sitting in an ancient millenarian forest, which there's very few left in Europe. Hambach Forest is one of them. It's a millenarian forest that's been there since the end of the last ice age, for the last 12,000 years. So it represents incredible biodiversity and habitat for incredible amount of wildlife, microbes, insects, and the forest is really amazing because it's really unusual. It's forests that you usually don't see. It's a forest with really diverse stands of trees. It's not like your typical pine forest with clear floor, but it transitions from beech forest to oak forest with intermixed trees and incredible wildlife habitat. 2 species of bats that are endemic and also endangered. And this forest that used to be 12,000 acres, it's been compressed into about 3,000 acres by the largest coal mine, Lignite coal mine in Western Europe, operated by RWE, energy concern, which has been operating this mine, ironically named after the forest that it's destroying. The mine itself is named Hambach. And the mine has also destroyed over 20 villages as well. So the effect is not just on wildlife, but it's also on local communities. So it really underlines that animal and eco-justice is social justice. They're very closely interconnected. And the mine itself, it's very closely resembling Mordor. It's 12 kilometers across, half a kilometer deep. The water itself is drained from about 50 to 70 kilometers away. There is no water table. Basically drying all the water eyes that you have in the forest and suffocating life by imposing this artificial drought. And this is also happening once again to local communities. And RWE is a concern that likes to portray itself as ecologically sound, as planting trees and planting wind turbines, but we see and we experience the everyday reality. And lignite is extremely poisonous, not just as far as local destruction of the local wildlife, but it's also on a global scale too. It's a major cause of mercury poisoning in oceans all around the world. It contains everything from cadmium to mercury, and that's just even not mentioning the CO2 aspects and the climate effects. And speaking of the climate, there's an incredible coalition and symbiosis of animal rights issues and activism that's converging now with the climate camps and also with the CAP summit that's happening now in Bonn, also in the middle of the coal mining region, which is symbolic of how the coal mining industry is trying to co-opt the climate discussion and portray itself as being green. And the reality that we see is also the reality of destruction, but it's also the dynamic that's very easy to block and sabotage as well. Lignite cannot be transported away because it already is so inefficient. It's already so symbolic of the energy peak. Very often arguments of job creation are used, of creating jobs, which is totally bogus and it's totally bull. Because about 5 times more jobs are created with renewable energy sources not having the same ecological impact on wildlife, on the climate itself. And with lignite being not able to be transported somewhere else, all the coal power plants are all around the mine itself. There's about 4 of them. One of them is powering nothing but the mine itself, and the coal is being transported by conveyor belts and coal trains, which makes it really easy to block and sabotage. There's been numerous direct actions over the last 5-6 years of people locking themselves to the train tracks, blockading the trains, locking themselves to the conveyor belts, climbing the coal diggers, which are the largest movable machines on the face of the earth. They're over 20 stories high and just eating away the earth and creating this huge chasm of a half a kilometer deep. And one of the most effective strategies for blockading the expansion of the coal mine was occupying and living in the forest, living in the trees, having a traditional tree sit, which started 5 years ago with original occupation at the line of the coal mine, and the occupation was evicted maybe 3 months after its beginning, And when the cops showed up and people told them that not only were there things in the trees, but there was also a tunnel underneath, which was built to prevent heavy machinery from from going in, they laughed until the voices came out from breathing holes. And this eviction of this tunnel turned out to be the longest and the most expensive eviction in German history. It took him 4 days. And there were 4 levels of the tunnel going down. Each level had the entrance to the lower level hidden. And at the end of each tunnel was mirrors. So when the cops would go in there, they would see their own lights at the end. And they would go like, oh, we can see them. We can see their lights. And only then realizing that it's their own lights in a mirror. And when they finally made it to the person down below, the person was locked onto a concrete block and they couldn't remove him. So they made a mistake of giving a police radio so that he could communicate with them. And over 3 days, he ended up playing hardcore German techno over the police radio channels where they were begging them literally to please stop playing this music. And they ended up bringing a special mining rescue team that ended up digging this big hole down to below. And we're sort of kind of experiencing the same with just simple tree occupations, because the normal cops are not certified. They cannot climb more than 2-3 feet. So by going up in the trees, we're escaping this violent dynamic that we very often see in street struggles or blockades, where the cops very often like to take you and remove you as soon as possible. Locking on is also another method of using lock-on tubes, lock-on boxes, or concrete boxes that prevents from this dynamic for also ensuing. And with tree houses, we've been evicted now. There's been already 3 different occupations after the first one. And after each eviction, the reoccupation is much bigger than the previous occupation. So they stopped evicting us for the last 2 years, realizing that it's counterproductive. And right now there's 19 different tree houses that are being occupied. 3 different occupations, village occupations. The tree houses have not just big nice windows, but also stoves, and are insulated with straw, which brings a really interesting ecosystem dynamic, because there's over 8 species of mice that live in the forest, including kangaroo mice that has feet like kangaroo and big bushy tails, and hazel mouse. And as soon as we build a treehouse with an insulated straw in between the walls, the forest mice instantaneously move into the straw in the walls, and they cohabit with us and chill out in the kitchen and just, basically look at us and just pick up the little crumbs. And it's an interesting example of symbiosis with wildlife. Presently, we just finished with Climate Camp, which is a great boost because a lot of people have come from the outside, a lot of animal rights groups, a lot of people dealing with eco-justice issues all around the world. And the next 2 events will be Skillshares Camp that we have twice a year in the spring and in the fall. The one in the fall is going to be 25th of September to 1st of October, which is also the beginning of the cutting season. Every year, a swath, half a kilometer swath of the forest is destroyed, and massive police actions. Usually during this time, we cannot come down from the tree houses because there's a massive amount of riot cops. So we're calling for people to stop by, not just for the Skillshares, which will be a little more peaceful, and but even with the cutting season, there is we have a support camp that's off limits to the police because it's on private property, and that has turned into a de facto eco village with straw bale houses and also vegan kitchen, 3 different libraries. And also what's happening this winter in November, there's the COP Summit, the Carbon Trading Summit, that will be happening in Bonn, to which we're inviting as many activists as possible. Once again, there is a large connection of factory farms and its effect on the climate itself. And Hambach Forest has had the incredible effect of bringing incredible amount of people together from the other struggles, ecological struggles, No TAF struggle in Italy, ZAD occupations in France, the people from the Groen Front in Netherlands. And also this is something we like to also extend to other struggles as far as training, once again with the Skillshares camp, but also with a perpetual climbing training that we have. You can show up at any time and learn how to climb, stay in the tree houses. And also, when possible, we and many people and many other activists, we extend our solidarity to other struggles out there. And the one that we would like to bring your attention to is the destruction of the ancient Białowieża Forest in Poland. It's the last remaining lowland primal forest in Europe, with an incredible slew of cohabiting wildlife that includes the European bison, three species, endangered species of woodpecker, and lynx, wolves. It's a magical landscape where you have incredible communities of fungi, of mosses. It looks tropical. You have endemic plants that are not found in any other areas. And that forest is being logged by the Polish government now with a bogus argument of actually healing the forest, because there's an outbreak of bark beetle, which is killing some of the pine trees. And this once again is shows the vicious loop of industrial usage of wildlife, life, and resources such as forests, because that outbreak and many like it are actually connected to climate change. Now with really mild winters, there is quite a few of different fungi and insect infestations that are no longer held in check by really cold winters. So they're expanding, and forests are one of the most incredible carbon storage, natural carbon storage sequestration methods. This is what nature has been doing forever. Every tree absorbs carbon, gives out oxygen. So with all this crazy bogus carbon trading that's talk of the industrialist capitalist world, forests have done that for millennia, and they're being destroyed. So with the excuse of the bark beetle destroying the forest and needing to take care of the infestation, they're using that as an excuse to cut down over 100-year-old trees in order supposedly to stop the bark beetle outbreak. And yet if you do that by cutting the trees, you have to burn or bury the bark. Instead, industrial harvesters that can cut about 500 trees a day, when somebody with a chainsaw can only cut 50, show up on the scene and automatically debark all the trees, spreading the bark all around. In other words, even spreading the infestation much more. They're compacting the soil that has never seen any equipment, and they're destroying something that's totally irreplaceable. There's been UNESCO calls for stopping. Białowieża Forest and National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Monument. They ignore this. There's been a European High Court also calls for stopping of the cutting. They've also ignored this. And yet there's been incredible grassroots convergence of activists going in, forming patrols every day, finding where the harvesters are, because unlike in the Hambach forest, where the forest is smaller and we can blockade it by just simply going the trees, in Białowieża Forest they cannot do this because the forest is really huge. So basically the harvesters are going into a different area every day. They're being held in areas that are protected by security guards, so they could, because they're already been blockaded in their parking spots. There's been over 15 blockades that have happened so far. And really amazing dynamic has ensued, because since there's been so much international attention, the tactic and the strategy of playing cat and mouse at a tree cutting sites, where the activists penetrate the cutting zone and run around and stop the cutting of the trees just by being in the area of the cutting, has been flipped on its head, in that instead of the cat and mouse game, activists being the mice and the security and the police being the cats, they're actually running away with the harvesters as soon as the activists show up with their lock-on pipes, because they don't want any public attention. Also, the logging companies that are shipping the wood out of Białowieża Forest, when we've blockaded their trucks, they've dumped the wood back into the forest, because it turned out that most of the distribution companies have a sustainable forestry certification, and wood from ancient forests is not sustainable by any means. So it's something that's so overt and yet so corrupt in a way. It's really mimicking the dynamic that's happening in a lot of Eastern European countries where there's a transition from the transparency, higher transparency that we see in the West to the complete lack of it that we see in the Far East. Poland, Romania, the Czech Republic are somewhere in the middle, where the governments are really corrupt, really connected with the special interests that are selling this wood. And the environmental minister is actually an entomologist, and he's coming out with all those like really horrible arguments, equating the environmental activists with eco-terrorists, blah, 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 the same. But also there's more right-wing activism there, and environmental activists are actually suffering from this as far as interacting with the local community. The local community is a little more alienated or a little more removed, because there's a lot of threats that are directed mostly at our supporters, threats of like burning down their houses even, and it's this really incredible way of appropriating like nationalist and very often even neo-fascist elements to be working hand in hand with the industry and automatically equating anybody that's doing animal rights, that's doing anything ecological, as being in the far, far left, which we know is not necessarily the case, because the struggle in Białowieża is an incredibly diverse struggle. There is a ton of scientists coming from all around the world, entomologists, botanists, which is making this struggle a really heady place where there's walks in the forest that are organized by entomologists that are basically showing the local insects, by botanists. And there's a camp called Camp for the Forest that's actually in a farmhouse where people are camping behind with really incredible facilities. It's really well financed because of Białowieża Forest being like a black forest or Yellowstone or Grand Canyon of Poland or of Europe, so it's a natural magnet. And the tourists are offering an incredible amount of support. The local authorities are really not sure how to deal with lock-on and blockading. And it's in the periphery of Poland, so it's small police departments. And this is also a really dynamic that's also being used towards our advantage. I would like to show you like a quick presentation of some of the films that have been made by Białowieża Forest.
Bezcenny skarb. Ostatni las o charakterze naturalnym w Europie. Naturalny to znaczy las, który żyje, rozwija się i reguluje samodzielnie. Nie chodzi tylko o drzewa, ale o wszystkie mieszkające tu istoty i połączone ze sobą procesy. Puszcza Białowieska nie potrzebuje ludzi. To my potrzebujemy jej, żeby pamiętać, czym jest dzika przyroda. Niektórzy już zapomnieli. Pod pretekstem walki z kornikiem Polskie Ministerstwo Środowiska i Lasy Państwowe tną puszcze w ponad 100-letnich drzewostanach, nawet w okresie lęgowym ptaków. Od niedawna z użyciem harwesterów. Taka maszyna potrafi zabić 200 drzew jednego dnia. Jesteśmy obozem dla puszczy. Uważamy ten skrawek pierwotnej przyrody za bezcenny. Nie godzimy się na dewastację ani na sprzedaż drewna pod pozorem ochrony lasu. Jesteśmy oddolną inicjatywą, pokojowym sprzeciwem, który łączy ludzi. Nie podlegamy żadnej organizacji ani partii. Będziemy tu tak długo, jak to będzie konieczne. I potrzebujemy Twojego wsparcia. Przyjedź do obozu dla puszczy na kilka godzin, na kilka dni, na jak najdłużej. Jest wiele działań, w które możesz się włączyć. Czasami sama Twoja obecność i energia mogą pomóc. Nie musisz być ekologiem. Naukowcy, artyści, informatycy, sportowcy. Spotkasz tu ludzi z Polski i z innych krajów. Mamy wspólny cel – powstrzymać dewastację puszczy. Chcemy, aby cała stała się parkiem narodowym.
Jestem tu, bo chcę działać.
Jeden svět, jedna příroda. Jeden les. Potřebujeme vaši pomoc na to, aby jsme ho zachránili.
I'm here because I love nature.
It's such a unique place.
I jestem tu, żeby pomóc drzewom się bronić.
Bo nie szyszkom jedno.
Bo puszcza ma problem.
Bo kocham polski las.
Bo zależy mi na puszczy.
Bo bez przyrody nie ma człowieka.
Bo musiałam zobaczyć to na własne oczy.
Bo chcę zrozumieć, co naprawdę dzieje się w puszczy.
Dlatego, że chcę bronić puszczy.
Jestem tu, Bo puszcza mnie zachwyca, bo harwester wycina 200 drzew dziennie.
Bo to jest nasza puszcza. Jestem tutaj, bo jestem patriotą.
Przyjedź. Potrzebujemy cię tutaj.
There was a number that has been used over and over, 200 trees per day per harvester. That number no longer applies, but because of the number of Blockade, they started doing 2 shifts and working at night with lights. So the 200 trees for harvester is 1 shift. And they actually started doing 2 shifts and working at night. And speaking of which, I would like to show you some videos from actually the actions as well. This is one of the truck blockades where people use pipes to basically form a... This is just the forming of the blockade. This is just the beginning. That blockade itself grew into about 30-40 people with 2 lines of people sitting back to back, supporters sitting locked on with a second level of pipes. This is just being set up. You can see the truck in the background. Later on it moved close to the blockade, but it couldn't pass. And it's just simple. This is a really interesting over here. You see the pipe with isomats, which is a strategy that actually the activists have used as decoys. As the guards started protecting the harvesters with more and more people started running at the harvesters with the first group of people running with nothing but a tube of an isomat, looking like it has a pipe inside. So the guards, of course, would grab those people first, but they were lighter, they could run faster, and they were just a distraction. And when they would already have the first wave of activists thinking that they confiscated a metal pipe that was nothing but a rolled isomat, the second wave of people would run in with the actual pipes that you see on the right-hand side, but also covered with isomats, so you couldn't tell them apart. And also isomats make it a little more comfortable if you have to be locked onto this pipe for an extended period of time. It's a great method when you're actually facing machinery. It's great for also blockading gates of slaughterhouses or access to any facilities that are being ecologically and destructive as far as animals are considered. And this is also when the machine has moved. This is a little later, and it's also a compilation, so it allows you to see. And here you see this old ancient wood. The wood very often is laundered in a way. It's they launder it like dirty money in that we notice that a lot of the wood is not marked like it should, which indicates that later it's mixed in with other wood because there's already massive blockading of the wood from Białowieża Forest. So they don't want anybody to know where this wood is coming from. So they mix it in with other sustainable source wood, and it's not certified officially. It's not marked as typed. So here we're counting. This is forest guards. They're basically the security guards of the forest department, and a lot of them are really the work they do mostly. They prevent people stealing wood from the forest. So here they're actually helping large conglomerates stealing and destroying wildlife habitats, and a lot of them have tried to convince us and tell us that they're also very ecological and that they're also for defending the forests. And this is the end of we were really sure they were coming for us, but yet instead something else happened, and here is a portrayal of what took place. They're reading statements and they're trying to get people to move. Nobody's moving. So here they're protecting the truck, so maybe nobody jumps on top of it like you see later on. This is exactly what we started doing later. And it's also it shows like in times of austerity, when so many cuts for social and ecological programs are being cut. And it also underlines how important humor is in all the struggles. It's very important to flip this repressive and depressive dynamic of destruction and repression into something that every movement that has ever been successful and that has ever been vibrant, that has utilized, which is not just humor, but poetry, music, and the creative element. Very often I call protest camps and protest struggles cultural refugee camps because we represent a cross-section that's extremely creative and which also underlines the argument, counteracts the argument that's very often used how we represent a very small percentage, which really is it's a pointless argument because when change starts, it has to start with a small number of people, and it always starts with people that are like here, like much more creative representation of society that represent poets, writers, musicians, painters, and this group of people like this has an incredible capability of influencing the larger masses. And this is also, this shows the blockade of one of the harvesters. If you look at on top, look at the people sitting on top. The harvester is totally swamped with people. And there's people sitting right on top, locked on the bottom. The whole area is cordoned off from the media. And here we are, right after they pulled us while we were trying to climb on the tree right next to the people blockading there. Because very often they take their cameras, so there's nobody to document them. And here we are being checked for IDs and told to actually stay in this place while they're checking our ID. But look, this is a 130-year-old tree that were told by numerous international bodies to stop cutting. And here you see the second machine. This is a front loader that shows the automatization of it. And here they made a mistake of leaving this machine right next to us. So as you see, like we're climbing right on this machine, right on top, and blockading the second machine. And that's why like international and outside support is so important, because they're not used to basically blockading. So very often they leave the machines running. And like this guy, he left the machine completely running throughout the time. Here he's telling us to get off the machine. This blockade lasted for 4 hours, like right on top of this arm of the harvester. That was the only place where we could actually go. Like, we're not there yet, but I think pretty soon there's still a conversation. It's still a place, the roof, where you could be pulled off. We didn't have any pipes going up there, so we ended up just going, and it's crazy arguments. They always tell us they're about to get out of the forest. So he's telling us, I'm about to get out of the forest. Well, basically they get out of the one cutting site and they go into the other. And this was really cool because they were beginning to hustle with the other activists. So by climbing onto another machine, we managed to detract all the other people, and they managed to be able to switch their pipes from a really hard place to a more, harder place to get for the authorities. And it also extended the blockade into the longest blockade in the forest. It was over 8 hours. And here, it was great. It was great that we had some literature as well, because very often when we're locked on, what we do, we love to read books, and it's sort of kind of, I can actually show you some images as well, I think. And this is the camp for the forest, actually, here. It's a beautiful, idyllic, typically Polish landscape in that there's even storks camping on the... camping. They told us, where do we get our furniture from, the counter-protesters, and we told them that we don't have furniture, that we live in tents. And living right on top of the barn. It's considered to be a symbol of good luck for storks to actually, and very often special wheels, wheels are put on top of the barn to actually even make it easier for the storks. Here you see a person locked on. There were actually, instead of people distributing food for the people that locked on and giving them water, we started having people distributing literature as well. Here we see another people blockading on top, also reading. And this was a really successful blockade in that we made them drop the wood back in the forest. It was very extremely satisfying to see the wood actually return. Yes, dead wood, but yet a rather symbolic, but yet still a victory. And the trucks ended up hanging out in the immediate area for a while, trying to pick up the same wood again. But we already had patrols there, and we made that impossible. And here you see a symbol of solidarity with Hambacher Forest flag. We would like to invite you to our Hambacher Forest table that we have down below, where there's more literature, stickers, and if you are interested in following the struggle, we ask you to sign our mailing list for updates. Here is kids of some of the supporters standing behind police lines. And it's really incredible the amount of people that are actually locking on, because in the Hambacher Forest we usually have 1 or 2 people locking on, but there it's 8-10 people locking on, totally swarming the place, which is really great. Here, just using handcuffs, but just as effective. And here on top, and cops going, but not all the way, of course. And with people locked on, there's not so much they can actually do. So it's an interesting civil disobedience and at the same time direct action method of using lock-ons, because it shows the incapability of cops dealing with a situation without resorting into more violence, which they can't really do without breaking your arms and showing a really negative side in the media. But at the same time, it's very important to realize how we represent much higher privilege, and we're in being able to do that, and how in ecological struggles in other places, even in France and Greece, people deploying lock-ons are very often injured and hurt by the police. Not to mention increasing rate of environmental activists that are being killed in places like El Salvador, Latin America, and Asia. And that's why it's really incredibly important to support all the other indigenous struggles all the way around the world. And here is one of the photo shoots that we did in front of all the log trees with our banners showing the incredible details of destruction, and at the same time showing the beauty of the forest as well. Would anybody like to ask real quick questions? Anything? Oh yeah, we took that wood and we scattered it all across the forest too. So even that symbolic victory was a little deeper. We also had patrols watching the truck, waiting around the truck as well. So they were not able to go back into the forest in that case. And there's patrols leaving every day. That's why it's also important to have as much support as possible from people to replace the people to engage in patrols to see this forest. People are going out with digital cameras, GPSs, and driving all across the forest trying to find the harvesters, follow the harvesters. There's massive amount of international media attention, and the Vice and many other international channels did pieces on us, and I don't have that piece here. I haven't checked it, so I'm not sure how good it is, but I recommend seeing it. Vice on Białowieża Forest, and also checking out the Camp for the Forest, which is a great resource on Facebook, and also Białowieża Forest on Twitter as well. We have more information also on Białowieża Forest, also at our Hambacher Forest table as well. So if you want to join us, and once again, if any of you are traveling in the area of Cologne, we want to invite you to stop by at Hambacher Forest. We always have guest spaces for activists, either in the meadow camp, in many of the eco structures that we made, or in the tree houses themselves. We're teaching everybody how to climb on the go, so you can learn how to climb. And we also build a guest house, which is a 3-story structure that doesn't require climbing on ropes or climbing skills, but it has ladders that we can raise when the police comes, and it has three levels. One is tool area, and it's actually really quite large because it's built not on a single tree but on 4 trees, so it's as large as from here to there. The lower area is food storage and tool storage. The second area is our vegan kitchen and our media space and dining room, and third is living space. So and it's a great way to actually see this incredible forest habitat that's being destroyed, that's disappearing in front of our eyes. And very often people say, "Oh, you're not going to win, you're not going to stop this." But it's not about winning or stopping. It's about making a stand. It's about making it as difficult as possible for them, making it expensive. Every corporation spends massive amount of money to portray themselves as positively as possible, which is reflected in their stock price. So by affecting them through protests, it has an incredibly horrible effect from their standpoint on their standing, on their PR image, and also from our standpoint, it has a really incredible effect of bringing people together, of becoming this nexus where people no longer feel alienated. Where outside of camps or conferences, we can connect, we can live together, we can engage in direct action, we can share our knowledge, we can share our struggles and extend solidarity to each other. Thank you.